Thank you, Cheryl. Hi, I'm Valerie Carter. I am a recreation therapist at the Manchester VA in New Hampshire, and I am here with Dr. Adam Ingrayo, and today we will be talking about exploring Hives, the therapeutic beekeeping program, and making sure it is available to all veterans. So we will get started. Just a couple disclosures. We don't have any financial relationships with any products or services that we might discuss. This material is supported through a USDA grant provided by NEFA and the North Central Region SARE. We are going to be providing some resources, but this is not an all-inclusive list and does not signify endorsement or approval of any particular education, training, company, organization, or devices that we are talking about. And reference from this presentation or from any information or services by the VA to any non-governmental entity, product, service, or information does not constitute an endorsement. We are not responsible for the content of any offsite web pages that are referenced. So these are our objectives for today. But before we get started into the topic for today, I do want to just do a quick introduction. So as I said, I am Valerie Carter. I am a recreation therapist at the Manchester VA. I've been facilitating the Hives program there since 2019. And so we've had quite a few, about 50 veterans go through our program. And we have multiple facilities that are running similar programs across the country. And I'm going to let my co-facilitator, Dr. Adam Ingrayo, introduce himself.
Thanks, Valerie. My name is Adam Ingrayo. I'm an entomologist and the national director and co-founder of the Heroes to Hives program, which is the nation's largest ag education program for military service members and their families. And we train over the last 10 years about 18,000 veterans and their family members in the art and science of beekeeping through a 9-month hybrid education course that is provided free to them. We've been working with Val and the VA for, oh goodness, about 6 or 7 years now on the therapeutics of beekeeping.
So we have done 2 previous webinars, one on just what it takes to facilitate a program. And then last month we talked about setting up community partnerships and how those are important and making sure you have the resources you need for running a program. We did want to open up this opportunity if anybody had any questions that came up from the last 2 webinars, if you were at any of them. So please feel free to write any of those questions in the chat. If there was anything, we just want to make sure we address those before we get into the topic today. Oh, I do suppose I need to see the chat in order to do that. Give me just a moment. I'm loading it up. Are the slides for this presentation available? They will be towards the end. Cheryl will put them in the chat. Is the feedback better? Are you getting no feedback now? Okay. If you are, let us know. Okay, thank you, Kristen. Cheryl, can you put the reference numbers for the previous trainings for TMS in the chat for people who were not able to attend earlier to those other ones? That would be great. All right, well, I guess we will get started. If any pressing questions come up, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will address them. So today we are going to talk about making sure that the therapeutic beekeeping is accessible to all veterans, regardless of their mental health, their cognition, if they have brain injuries. We talked a lot last time about social isolation and community and how we can make it so that it's available to veterans who are in rural areas. Today, we are really going to focus a lot on how to set up your apiary or how to make sure an apiary you are working with is set up in a way that's going to be effective and not be limiting to anyone with mental health or physical health disabilities. So we're going to go into a lot of that today. So it's really important when you are bringing veterans into your program to do an intake assessment and that you're doing this entire biopsychosocial assessment. So you're looking at their biology, you're looking at what is going on with their physical health, what is going on with their mental health, and what are their social and environmental limitations. So that might be finding out if they have previous injuries, if they have trouble lifting things, if they have problems with their neck, back, knees, legs. A lot of those injuries that we see really often in the veterans that we work with due to their time in the military. But on top of that, we want to also find out, are their trouble, do they have trouble with vision? Because being able to see what's going on in the hive is really helpful. As well as hearing and smell are actually two really important things when it comes to beekeeping that can help identify problems in the hive and help you to understand what's going on and also to pick up what's going on with the colony as a whole. The bees give off pheromones that we can smell that let us know that there's spreading the alarm pheromones. Hearing when the buzzing changes can help us to understand, like, oh, things are going on, the bees are getting agitated, I need to either change my behavior, add some smoke, close it up. There's a lot of ways that we react to what the bees are doing. And so knowing what the veterans' limitations are and knowing how we can work with them is really important. So we're going to go into how to really address some of those, but also how we set up our apiary and how we have our hives, how close they are, how far apart, can also impact the comfort level and the benefits that the veterans get out of this program. So we want to assess for anxiety, PTSD, MST, but also memory, executive functioning. Can they follow directions? How many steps in a direction can be given? Um, and also, what is the best communication style and learning style? For anyone who was looking, Cheryl just put the TMS numbers in the chat. So those are the reference numbers for the previous trainings. Thank you, Cheryl. And then we also want to look at, like, what are our social and environmental limitations? Do we need to assist with getting transportation? If someone's going to participate in a virtual training, do we need to look at helping them with getting on a computer or a digital divide consult, getting them what they need to be able to fully engage in this treatment modality. So part of the Hives program is a thorough intake assessment. This is a measurement-based practice. So we want to, in our assessment, we have a standardized assessment that we have. And we're working on making that a national template that's available. It's in process right now, but it is on its way. So as part of that, we want to make sure we have that diagnosis, what they're being referred for, find out what their beekeeping experience is, and then what their goals are for participation in the program. And we want to explain the program to them, let them know that it's not only a beekeeping education program, but that we're going to be teaching them the skills they need in order that they can use to help manage their stress, difficult emotions, and that we can learn from the bees and take that into our daily life. As part of our intake assessment, we're going to do the PHQ-2, we're going to do a GAD-7, and a Promise 10. So anyone who's not familiar with those, PHQ-2 is a depression screening. It's just 2 simple questions, and it's very straightforward. The GAD-7 is an anxiety measure, and the Promise 10 is a quality of life measure. We use those just to find out where people are at the baseline and see how it might have changed over time. We also want to assess for bee sting allergy. Anyone who has a serious bee sting allergy with anaphylactic reaction is going to need to be, it's contraindicated for this program for the hands-on portion of it. If they would like to participate in the bee school, they're more than welcome to. I have a number of veterans who don't have bee sting allergies, but who have been beekeepers in the past or have an interest in it, even though they don't plan on keeping their own beehives, who just want to learn something new and are really curious about bees. So they come to the classes. Um, so that is something that someone with a bee sting allergy could have, but we also want to make sure we get that medical clearance for their participation. And then we also want to find out from the veterans about their physical limitations and their strengths and weaknesses in their physical, cognitive, psychological, and environmental. And that just helps us to determine where they need some assistance and how we can make sure that we are making it so that they are going to get the most out of the program that they're engaging in. So we're going to talk about about setting up your apiary. Um, and getting it prepared to be set up. And I believe Adam is taking over from here. So I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Valerie. So yeah, we're going to be talking about kind of the logistics of setting up an apiary, kind of layout, considerations that you should be putting in place when you're thinking about setting up an apiary. So this picture that we see right here, this is one of my personal apiaries, and this is actually an apiary that we do use for education. But if you look at how it's kind of structured, the hives are pretty close together. It's, you're looking at like some of them are as close as like 2 or 3 feet together. And so something as simple as spacing is a consideration we need to make when we're thinking about an apiary. Other things that you see going on here are a nice flat ground, which is always very important when you're thinking about setting up an apiary. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide here, Val. So let's first talk about getting to and around the apiary. So the first thing you need to be thinking about when you're talking about bringing people out to an apiary. Now, if this is something that's on site at your facility, you may already have a space that's close to a parking lot that has already paved pathways, that's fully accessible, because if it's at a VA facility, it's going to be an ADA accessible facility in a lot of situations. So you may have paved paths and things like that available to you. But not all apiaries are structured like that. And if you're working with a beekeeper outside of the VA and bringing individuals to a site that's outside of something that's a manicured grounds site, you're going to be dealing with some of these considerations. Number one is parking. A lot of the veterans that we work with in the Heroes to Hives program, the mobility aspect of actually getting to an apiary is difficult. And I'll use an example. When we first started the Heroes to Hives program, I was working for Michigan State University, and we had this beautiful apiary we set up for the first Heroes to Hives cohort to do on-ground training. And it was at the Michigan State University Bird Sanctuary. And we thought, what a fantastic idea. They're going to be able to take this nice leisurely walk through all of these habitats and see these amazing birds, and then end at our bee yard. Well, that was great. We had paved paths and all of that, but it was about a quarter of a mile walk to get to the apiary. And many of our students could not do that physically. And so we ended up having to set up a shuttle service to bring them from the parking lot to the apiary. And that was a big learning experience for us, that we knew now we want to make sure that when we set up an apiary, we are not asking people to go very far. And if we are, we have the accommodation to get them there in a whether it be a side-by-side or a vehicle, something like that. Pathways are a big consideration as well. Oftentimes, if you're working with people that are using walkers or canes or wheelchairs, the terrain that they're going over it needs to be very level, it needs to be very compact, and if it's something like grass, it needs to be closely cut so that these mobility devices are not limited by the terrain that you're asking people to move over. And so what you see in this picture here is an example of what some apiaries will do is they'll actually put weed exclusion cloth underneath the apiary and around the apiary so that it is a nice, flat, clean surface that always has the surface area very friendly for walking on. So everything's leveled, and then they put this weed mat over there. That way you don't get grass or things like that can become tripping hazards for folks, especially when they're using mobility devices. The terrain in the soil is always something you want to consider as well. Heavy clay soil, I always like to use as a good example, because if you're going to be doing a workshop or an exercise at an apiary and it's on heavy clay, if you get rain, a couple days before, that clay becomes very difficult to move a mobility device through. Or for people that are just, struggling to get around, heavy clay, by, every step you take, you add an inch to your height, it becomes very difficult to be able to get through. And then the spacing of the hives is always important as well. And I mentioned that in the last slide, that idea of making sure there's plenty of space between the hives. And Val touched on it when we were talking about, some of the considerations we want to have for folks. Having everybody gathered around in a really tight space and people over top of you and kind of trying to look in over you because it's a tight quarters, that can be very uncomfortable for some folks. And so making sure that you have plenty of space around your hives, individual hives, is really important. I always try to make sure that I have at least 5 feet in all cardinal directions around the hive that people can be around. And depending on the audience I'm working with, I may change that a little bit. So if I know somebody is part of a cohort that's coming out and doing training that's maybe using something like a track chair, I'm going to make sure that I'm making available space so that it's very easy to get through. You want to make sure that there's plenty of room to get devices through in your apiary.
Can I just say something about the surface as well? When you're thinking about the surface, like this picture here has that ground cover cloth, you want to make sure that that is one that the water can go through, that is permeable. Um, if not, you're going to have standing water potentially. So knowing where your water goes, we've had some challenges with that around our apiary at the VA, where the water has washed away some of the stones that we have. So if we did it again, I would design it a little bit differently, because we have actually just a thick tarp underneath to keep the grass from growing up, because we're like, oh, that's a great idea. But in reality, it just caused a lot of water issues.
That's a great point, Valerie. And you can see, so the picture that this one's here, the lines that you have on there. So this is agricultural grade weed exclusion cloth that is permeable, and it has about a 20-year lifespan on it. So this is something that's going to last you a very long time, but it is completely permeable, and it is something that you would purchase from an agricultural supply company. They usually come in 3-foot increments up to about 12 feet wide.
Yeah, and also making sure that you don't have to go up and down too many hills in order to get to the apiary. Ours is down a little hill, which can be challenging for some of our veterans to get down and up to. It's not a big hill, but it's still it's kind of got some steep it got a steep incline to it.
All right, so let's talk about facilities. So, depending on who you're working with, you always need to be conscious of the facilities that you're asking them to go to. So let's first talk about education in classrooms. So we do a lot of kind of hybrid education when we go out and do some of our workshops for Heroes to Hives, where we may have like an in-class component for an hour, and then maybe we go out to the apiary for a couple hours after that. So if we are using a classroom, we always want to make sure that the facilities can accommodate everybody, making sure that doorways are accessible for wheelchairs, making sure that there are space underneath tables for a wheelchair to come in, making sure that the aisleways in the classroom are accessible. All of that is really important to make sure you're meeting people where they need to be. And so classrooms, are going to be a big thing. Restrooms as well, making sure, and this is something that with the partners that we work with at Heroes to Hives, all of our partners know that they need to have an ADA accessible restroom on site, and it needs to be close to the apiary. It's not, we not need to be asking people to walk a quarter mile to go use the restroom. It needs to be close. And that can be a permanent facility, but oftentimes a portable toilet that's ADA accessible is a very easy thing to put near an apiary and use in a seasonal manner. Here, where we do our educational workshops at my farm, we always have an ADA accessible toilet that's at the farm all season long when we're doing workshops. And then when the season ends, that toilet goes away. So that's something that's very easy and relatively inexpensive to incorporate into a site so that you can make sure that you have facilities for folks. Potable water is something that we don't often think about, but when you're working in a bee suit in the middle of summer, it gets hot, and you need to make sure that you have water available for folks, or before people come out to the workshop or to the session that they're coming to, you need to make sure that they know that they need to have water with them. And that's really important because I'll tell you, having worked in bees for almost 20 years, and I started my bee career in the Central Valley of California, where it's triple digits in the middle of the summer, you get very hot in a bee suit very quickly, and heat stroke is a very real risk when you're working bees, especially if you're working with folks who don't oftentimes do the physical work and labor that's involved with beekeeping. Seating is also something that's really important. Making sure that you have seating available for folks in the apiary is really nice. We always have seating around the hive that we're working so that if somebody needs to sit down while, it's a hot day outside or if they just can't stand for prolonged periods of time, that there's something available for them. You can also tell people, hey, if you want to have a seat while you're here, feel free to bring a chair with you. And we do that all the time and have lots of people that bring their own chair that they're comfortable sitting in, which is also really important as well. Shade is another real good idea. Again, hot times in the summer working bees, you want to make sure people can escape that. Signage. When we're talking about signage, we're not only talking about signage for the public, so that bees are near and be careful, and bee sting to protect their hives, those types of things. But you also want to make sure that you have signage to meet people where they are. Folks that are dealing, and I'll share myself, I have a traumatic brain injury. And one of the things that I know with a lot of when I was first going through and learning how to deal with that, and I know a lot of my battle buddies from the Army that are suffering from the same thing, the memory component is something that we struggle with sometimes. And oftentimes repetition is necessary in order to get things to kind of set in. And that can take a very long time. With signage, one of the nice things you can do with signage to make things accessible to everybody is that, for example, there's life cycles for honeybees. So 21 days for a worker, 24 days for a drone. We need to know these things, and they're important to know for making management decisions in the apiary. But these are sometimes hard for people to commit to memory. So signs that actually have these dates, the timelines and the life stages of these organisms, so that when you're having a conversation in a bee yard about something like that, everybody feels like they can participate, because it's not like, oh, I can't remember what they said about, how many days a worker takes to go from egg to adult. But if I have a reference material there, that then draws me in and allows me to engage in the session. And that's that whole thing about isolation, right? We want to give people the tools so that they can feel like they can be part of this community and give something of value to it. First aid kits, very important. You're working with sharp tools. You're working with a smoker that can burn you if you touch the smoker. So having basic first aid kits is really important. And then fire safety as well. That smoker is a smoking device and does have embers in it. And if you don't store it properly, it can start a fire. And so you want to make sure that you're always observing fire safety, especially in areas that are prone to wildfires. You want to make sure that that smoker is always maintained. And when you are storing it, that it is in a fireproof storage container, like a metal trash can or something like that.
So before we go on to as we go on to the next slide, I am going to just put a poll out so you could share with us if you plan to start a Hives program at your facility. So I'll just put this poll out and then we'll continue on. We're going to talk about equipment.
All right, so this is where we get into like the fun stuff. This is all of the alternative equipments that we can use in beekeeping to meet people where they are with their disabilities. So we talked about in some of the previous webinars, the Langstroth hive, which is the industry standard hive in the United States. And if you recall, the paper that we shared that we co-wrote about this particular topic, about the Hives program and the therapeutic beekeeping practices that have been developed through there, you may recall that one of the statistical significant things that we found in that work was that mobility decreased from the start point of participating in the course to the end point of coming out of a session. And one of the reasons that we think that could be is because the Langstroth hive is a physical hive. You stack vertically and you have to remove those boxes one by one in order to inspect a bee colony. Those boxes sometimes, and the medium boxes can sometimes weigh up to 50 pounds. And that's a lot to ask of somebody that's dealing with lifting restrictions. And so there are different things that we can incorporate that are not Langstroth hives that you can use to help people that are suffering from different types of disabilities. So hive stands is a basic one. You can basically, with a Langstroth hive, a traditional hive, you can put these hives on stands, and you should, to help with pest pressure like ants and things like that. But you can make these hive stands as tall or as short as you want. So if you want to make a hive stand that's a little bit taller that you can mount a Langstroth hive on, that will get that closer to where that person is. However, you are still going to be stacking it vertically. And so at some point, you're going to have to move heavy boxes. And that's where different hive styles come in. So the first hive style I'm going to talk about is the Aja hive, or the AZ hive. And this is the AZ hive right here. The AZ hive is the traditional hive from Slovenia. And Slovenian beekeepers, I had the great pleasure of going to Slovenia last year and working with one of their universities and their government to kind of learn more about accessible beekeeping in Slovenia. And this is one of the places they brought me. This is the Paraplegic Beekeepers Association of Slovenia. And what this is this gentleman is demonstrating the Aja hives. The difference with the Aja hive is, unlike the Langstroth hive, is it has fixed space. So with Langstroth hives, if you have a good honey flow going on, you just add one box after another to fill with honey. With the Aja hive, you're dealing with a fixed space. And this center picture that you see here is a 3-story Aja hive. It has 30 frames in it, and you work the hive from the back like you see on the right picture. Basically, instead of having to lift heavy boxes, the heaviest thing you ever have to lift is a single frame. And Slovenian beekeepers love making fun of Americans because of all the disabilities that we end up getting because of the hive style that we work. In the United States, it's called beekeeper's back. And it is something that pretty much anybody that's in the industry for decades is going to be suffering from lifting heavy boxes all the time. The Aja hive completely solves that. Now, the difference with the Aja hive is this is a hive that's stored in a building. So if you are going to incorporate Aja hives into your apiary, you need to have them in some sort of a structure. And that's part of the design of the Aja hive, is that you work them from inside of a structure. But an awesome, awesome accessibility, hive for accessibility. Anybody that is able to use their hands, or even if they have limited use of their hands and can use some, adaptive devices to help hold frames, pretty much anybody can work this hive. The next hive we'll talk about is the top bar or long Langstroth hive. So the picture that you see on the left, and with that kind of smaller photo up above it, that is a Kenyan top bar hive. The Kenyan top bar hive was a hive that was developed actually by Canadian researchers for Kenya. And so this is, but it's called the Kenyan top bar hive because that's where it was popularized. This is the reason it's called a top bar hive is because you don't actually have full frames like you see on the right picture. The gentleman holding that full frame, that is a Langstroth style frame that he's holding there. You can see the frame on the left is very different. And all it is a top bar. It's a piece of wood that the bees build combs from, and that's how they fill out the colony. The nice thing about top bar hives is, again, you're not having to lift any boxes. You work on a horizontal space. And so the most you ever have to move is a single frame. And top bar frames are much lighter than Langstroth frames because they have less surface area. The drawback of top bar hives is they don't overwinter well. So if you live in an area like I do in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where we get harsh winters, these colonies will not survive because they don't store honey above the colony. And that's where it needs to be for long, prolonged winters. But this is a great hive for anybody that's working with somebody with a disability that's limiting their ability to pick up frames or heavy boxes. The other thing that you can think about this one, and something that we've done with one of our top bar hives that's not pictured here, is you can actually mount these so that they articulate. So I have a top bar hive that is specifically made for people in wheelchairs. And they can wheel right up to the top bar hive, and then we can articulate the hive so that the frames are facing right at them. And they don't have to kind of peer over and try and get into the hive itself. So that's another thing to think about. The hive that you see on the right side, that is a long Langstroth hive. This is a hive that uses regular Langstroth frames, but on a horizontal plane. And so there are 30 frames across that entire hive, and you work from that horizontal plane. So never having to lift anything heavy like a box. The most you're going to have to lift is a single frame. So great accommodations. And here's our Langstroth hive. So if you are working with a Langstroth hive and that's all you have, there are ways that you can actually improve the accessibility of a Langstroth hive. And let's talk about that a little bit. So the picture that you see on the left and the right, they do have some differences, and you may not be able to tell the differences right away, but the pictures of the hives on the left compared to those on the right, the ones on the left are 8-frame Langstroths, and the ones on the right are 10-frame. The 10-frame Langstroth is the industry standard. And so that is what you see in all commercial operations. You very rarely are going to see an 8-frame commercial operation. But the one that you do see on the left, those 8-frame colonies, that is a 20% weight reduction in overall weight of the colony and every single box. So it's a dramatic reduction in weight. And the way you can make this go even further is if we look at the picture on the right, you see the middle colony on the picture on the right, that has two deep hive bodies, and then you have two medium hive bodies above that. I'm talking about the depth of the actual box that the bees are in. That is the traditional setup, that middle colony. But what you can do, oh, thank you very much. You
Yep.
read my mind. But the one that you see on the far right of that same picture, those are all medium hive bodies. I'll let you in on a little secret. The bees don't care what size box they're in. That is something you need to make that helps you out. So by eliminating the deep boxes, which is eliminating 3 inches from the overall box itself, you're eliminating a ton of weight. So you can actually use, in an apiary that's built for accessibility, you can use 8-frame medium Langstroths, and that's it. And now you've gotten basically to the maximum reduction that you can in weight on a Langstroth hive. The other thing that's on here when it comes to ergonomics is extended handholds. So the handholds are the little holes that you see on all of these boxes where you stick your hands and pick these things up. The thing that nobody talks about is those holes, they fit like your fingertip in them. And so all of the weight of these boxes is on your fingertips. By adding a little tiny piece of wood above those handholds, you can increase the surface area of that handhold tremendously, giving you a lot more ability to lift these things. For people that are suffering with things like arthritis in the hands, this is a great adaptation for Langstroth hives. That improved surface area gives them a lot more area to grip on, rather than relying on just the tips of those fingers to carry all that weight. Hive lifters are another thing you should probably be thinking about as well. This is something we use in our own apiary. This allows you to basically pick up portions of a colony that are a Langstroth colony without having to lift anything up. So the one you see on the left is a homemade hive lifter made by Agribility, and the one on the right is one that I purchased that's made by a company called Captar Lift out of Hungary. And the nice thing about this is that you can basically clamp onto any box and lift the entire stack up. So that's relevant when you're doing things like inspections, because all the stuff you care about is in the bottom boxes. All the heavy stuff is in the top boxes, meaning the honey, but all the brood and everything's down below. So you need to get down below. So a lot of times when it comes to accessibility, especially when you're working with people with severe disability, just eliminating the lifting altogether by using a hive lifter is a great adaptive technology. Some of these nowadays are actually coming in electric models. So like the one you see on the right is a hand crank model. They make another version of this that is all electric, that has a transmission so you can drive it, and also has a lifting motor so that you can lift as well.
In addition to that, I have been able to work with prosthetics, and we have developed a hive lifter with the rehab engineers out of the Richmond VA that the veterans can assemble themselves based on this one on the left that was designed by Agribility. So we worked with Agribility and took that model, and we developed, worked with them to get those pieces so that the veteran or the VA staff, whoever needs it, could purchase all of the pieces necessary at like Home Depot or Lowe's or Martin's or whatever your home improvement big box store is near you, and then assemble it. We are just finishing up the instructable on how to do that, and the veteran who received that is going to be assembling it and recording himself assembling it, so that we can have that all available so that other people can put them together, order them, and do those kinds of things so that it can be used at different facilities for veterans at their own home apiaries in all of those places, because hive lifters can be really a valuable tool. There's
Very much.
also, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say very much so. They're an incredible tool to add to a area that has Langstroth hives.
And most apiaries are going to use Langstroth hives, mostly because they are what is commercially available and most used in the US, which is challenging for people with physical disabilities. And we need more instruction on using other types of hives like the Aja hive. And that information it's growing, and there's becoming more mentors around that style of hive. And like Adam, the top bar hive doesn't work well in in New Hampshire either.
Yeah.
So we don't use that much up here. Um, but it is a great option for people that are in warmer climates that don't have to overwinter in such cold areas. So there's a lot of different options and a lot of different ways to work with different physical disabilities. In addition to these really high tech, fancy, they're not really high tech, but just these hive lifters that will lift multiple boxes. There's two-person hive lifters as well. I do find that sometimes they're a little riskier, the ones that are commercially available, because we definitely have dropped boxes with them. But it does make it easier to lift the boxes with a two-person lift, or take out individual frames and move them into an empty box if you're removing honey. There's a lot of different small ways to really adapt for those physical disabilities and those physical limitations.
Absolutely. And just we've mentioned agribility here a couple times. For those
Mm.
of you that are unfamiliar with agribility, agribility is a USDA funded project that's in 28 states, and their goal is basically to help farmers with disabilities continue farming. We work with them extensively in Heroes to Hives for all of our disabled veterans that we work with to help them get adaptive technologies. And actually, the picture on the left is an agribility client here in Michigan and one of our Heroes to Hives instructors who received one of these. But that is what they do. They go out and they do assessments with the individual. They determine what are the accessible technologies that they need to meet them where they are with their disabilities. And then oftentimes they'll help design those, construct them, and even fund them as well.
And agribility is in many states. Not every state has an agribility chapter, but like New Hampshire does not, but there's one in Maine. And so if you're not able to, if you don't have an agribility in your state, you can work with agribility in other states and they will help with advice and tips. And they have a great resource online on their website as well. So I highly recommend looking into them if you're looking for adaptations for any farming and agriculture. Um, endeavor that you're working with veterans or yourself on.
Mhm.
So just talking a little bit about sensory impairments and how we can work with veterans who have vision, hearing, or smell impairments or loss. So when we're talking about vision, veterans and individuals who have vision loss can take care of bees. There are a number of beekeepers out there who are blind, who are beekeepers. So the very first thing to do is to use a magnifying glass or use some reading glasses as magnifiers. Eggs in those cells in that are very tiny and very hard to see. So having a way to expand and make it look bigger is really helpful. Also, having a little flashlight to shine into the cells can be helpful as well. If you have a veteran who has blindness, referring them or working with your blind rehab specialist or your VIS team, your vision impairment services team, they are able to assess what the veterans need. They can provide individual devices for the veterans to use while they're at the beehives or while that they can use throughout their whatever other activities they're doing in their day or in their life. Um, my vision impairment team, our bros has offered to come down to the beehive, has come down with us, worked with a couple veterans, and talked with them about the best options to help them to be able to see what we're doing in the hives. It's also possible to take pictures, right? Lots of people, most people have phones that can take a picture, and sharing that picture and asking for assistance in identifying what they're seeing, or taking that picture and putting it on a computer where they can zoom in and expand in to see what they're seeing, is a really great way to adapt. You can't necessarily respond in the moment, but it is something that can help to identify what is going on in the hive. There's also an accessible beekeeping app, which is under, it's it's in the works. It's not fully, it's rolled out. It's made by an individual who has some disabilities, and he is working to crowdsource people identifying and helping each other with what's going on in those pictures that they're taking. So you share it and people can crowdsource and respond and help out identify what's going on. When it comes to hearing, hearing is not absolutely vital to taking care of bees, but it is helpful. So taking a recording of what is being heard, having some hearing aid or something that can be connected so that you can hear better. And if you're doing classes, making sure that if closed captions are needed, having that available. But there are many people who use hearing aids that they could, if needed, you can connect them to a phone and use a microphone on the phone to get a better sense of what's being heard through the microphone on the phone. There's a lot of different ways. So working with your audiology team, if you have some people that would really benefit from. And then with smell, I know this, like every time I say this, I like laugh to myself a little bit. I'm like, yes, we're going to talk about smelling, but it is one of those sensory impairments that if if impaired, that limits what the person is receiving and understanding of what's going on in their hive. So smell can tell you a lot about what's happening in your hive. So if someone has an impaired sense of smell, working with another person or just knowing what else to look for when smell is not an option. I don't know too many other adaptations for smell, but I'm sure there are maybe a few out there, but really just having another person at the hive who can smell or what you're looking for instead. Anything you want to add to any of these, Adam?
The only thing I would add, Valerie, and this is something I was just thinking of in the moment when you were talking about smell, is also the ability to breathe. So we had a student many years ago that was suffering from severe emphysema and COPD and
Mm,
could not be around the smoker. And the smoker is a very important tool that we use in beekeeping. And you want to make sure that that's something that, if you do have somebody that's suffering from one of those types of things, that you are making sure that you're conscious of where that smoker is being put. Agribility actually helped this individual with an oxygen tank, a small oxygen tank mounted to his belt so that he could actually wear a mask while we were working with bees. And so that was something that we were able to work with Agribility on through Heroes to Hives. But that is something also that you may run into with folks, especially folks that are dealing with chemical exposure and things like that in wartime as well, may develop some of those types of respiratory problems.
yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That makes a lot of sense. So just a couple other options for learning and for handling some of those social or environmental barriers, knowing that there's a lot of different ways that people can experience and engage in learning. So we have lots of virtual classes available, right? There's virtual education sessions. The VA Hives program, we have virtual sessions that if your facility doesn't have a program and you want to refer people to it, we can do that through an interfacility consult. Heroes to Hives has an online self-paced 9-month beekeeping education program. Mission Believe has virtual classes as well as Great Plains Master Beekeeping. And then the local bee clubs that we talked about last time we were meeting and have lots of really great opportunities for learning and lots of great classes. So some of those are live and synchronous, some of those are not. And then being able to get some hands-on lessons. And there are some local bee clubs that are doing some virtual classes, but we also, through VA Hives, we have a Friday virtual hive inspection that has been really interesting the last couple sessions. 2 weeks ago, we were able to, no, it was actually last week. Either way, the last session, we were partnering with one of the community partners that we have out in Colorado who shared he was going to be doing a hive inspection with us. But it turns out he also had a swarm that day. He was going to be doing splits later in the day. And one of his colonies swarmed to a tree. And so we not only got to do a hive inspection with him, but we got to show the veterans how to collect a swarm from a tree, put it in a box, and what to do with it at that point, and do a split. So there were all these great opportunities that may or may not have happened at the VA. So we had additional learning opportunities. And then we are also in development of doing some virtual reality learning through VR chat and maybe some other possible learning opportunities. So there's a lot of different ways that we can do learning and provide that opportunity for our participants. Anything else you want to add on this one?
I just love that those students got to see that in action. I mean, it just shows the dynamic nature of an apiary, and you'd never know what you're walking into. So that's fantastic.
It was really a very cool experience. Like it was like he was like, okay, we're gonna do this hive inspection, but we're gonna do it really fast because I have this other really cool thing for you. And I was like, we can just go to the other thing. He's like, nope, we're gonna show you what we're looking for. So it was one of those things that you just take in the moment, and it was a really awesome experience just to see him shake that swarm out of the tree, and it was the biggest swarm I've ever seen. Into the hive, then we went and did a split and came back, and the veterans could see how all the bees were moving into the equipment because he had gotten the queen in there, and everything went really smoothly. All right, we are going to make sure we have some time for questions at the end, but we do have, so these are our 3 webinars, and Cheryl put the TMS training numbers in the chat. So all of these webinars will be available 45 days after the training for through TMS, through the Enduring, and you can, if you didn't make it to all of the other ones, feel free to go back and take a look at those. We were planning on doing a 2-day facilitator training with some in-person hands-on stuff, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen this year because of limitations with travel potentially and in-person trainings changing. So we wanted to know how many of you would be interested in attending a virtual Be Calm, Be Well facilitator training. Like if we were to offer this as a opportunity for you to virtually learn how to do some of these experiences and some of these trainings and facilitate some of these mind and body practices, as well as get a little bit more on the beekeeping, just so we can have an awareness and a knowledge of what you are interested in, because that is something that we are working on. We just want to make sure it's something that people would be interested in. And it's looking like that would be something that people would be interested in. Okay. Cool. Thank you for providing that feedback. That's really helpful for us. And then these are just some of our resources. Oh, I didn't update that, but the training will be available in May. That February was from our previous page, from our January training. And then also after this training, you will have available to you. There will be some videos for additional trainings to learn about beekeeping. So those will be available on TMS through this training, and we will get that information to you once this is finished. And then there's education available, Heroes to Hives. The registration for that is November to February each year, and then it goes from March to October. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And that is open to veterans and VA staff as well. And Mission Believe is open to veterans. And Great Plains Master Beekeeping is open to anybody.
Yes, it is.
And we have our VA Hives Best Practices call the first Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, as well as the SharePoint site and the Diffusion Marketplace. So lots of different resources that are available to you. And then we will open up for questions. I'm also going to put one final poll in here if you're willing to chat with any of our Hives team to just kind of give us any feedback on what we've been providing. It gives us help. It's helpful for us to get this feedback. But is anybody, I know there's some stuff in the chat that I haven't seen.
I think
But
we
we'll
have
open up.
one question in the chat that I saw come through. Let's see here. I think it's Cheryl. I am in Colorado. How can I connect with Hives for Heroes in Colorado? So Hives for Heroes is a different organization than the organization I run. They are an organization where they connect veterans with an individual mentor. So they're not an education program, they're a mentorship program. You would have to contact them through their website. They have a form to fill out if you want to work with them. If you're interested in Heroes to Hives, which is the program I run, we do bring on partners every year, with the exception of this year because of the federal funding freezes and kind of the up in the air nature of USDA grants right now. So we are not taking on any new partners this year, but generally we do bring on partners every year. And if you would like to connect with me on that, you see my email address down there at the bottom, adam@mifs.org. You can connect with me there, Cheryl.
And Cheryl, also your clinical resource hub out of Vision 19 is running this program. So Jamie Gruner is the person who is facilitating that, and she's a great person to reach out to get involved with getting something going or getting connected with her. Any other questions or comments?
I could add to that, to what we had kind of talked about, Val, earlier. Valerie mentioned that we're going to be adding in some beekeeping instruction videos at the end of this that you'll all be able to participate in. That is basically like a short beginning beekeeping course that we've designed for you. That's going to take you through kind of like the basic biology, the biology of the superorganism, how to handle hives, all of those kind of questions you're asking yourself about, like, wow, what am I? Okay, so I want to do all this beekeeping stuff, but I don't know anything about bees. That is going to be kind of a crash course. I believe it's 12 lectures and a couple handouts to support you to learn a little bit more about bees. So we put that together for you as well.
All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, feel free to, if anything comes up, please feel free to reach out. Yes, Denise, the VA in Augusta does have a great beekeeping program. So yeah, please let her know. She can look at the recording for more information. She can also reach out to me for more information. Feel free to let her know to reach out.